The reason for this was just to kind of educate you, just like going forward with Marshall, correct?
Mhm. Marshall, yeah.
You just have an idea of like how training works and all that stuff. Okay.
Okay.
I think you guys had inquired about doing like the training sessions, like when he's here for daycare and stuff, right?
Yeah, so Marshall went to a 3-week board and train program out in the burbs, and it was
Tops, yeah.
yeah, Tops Kennel in Grays Lake, and he was trained with a prong collar and just basic obedience,
Yep.
and he responded really well. He was there right at like 4 months old, and um, like has a pretty great foundation already. He just needs like some additional work with just proofing some of his like down stays, and like we want to eventually do some off leash stuff, and so we're not sure if we want to like continue with just using like the prong collar, or I know that you guys are really strong supporters of using an e-collar,
Mhm.
but eventually we would like for him to be, fully off
Oh,
leash. Yeah. Mhm.
okay. So there's different styles of training. Like there's positive reinforcement, which is treat based and food only type, and then you have like gentle leaders, no pull harnesses, slip chains, prong collars, which you have, and then e-collar,
Mhm.
right? Um, so each tool has a ceiling. Positive only has a very low ceiling, right? So that's why we do it for puppies under 6 months, for the puppy head start, real basic stuff, just teaching the puppy how to think, potty training, crate training, and preventing behavior issues, because it's like kindergarten for puppies. Now, can you train a puppy to a high level? Yes, but most people aren't going to invest that amount of time and stuff, right? Prong collar uh, is right in the middle. It's much better than food only. It's much better than the gentle leader and all that stuff, because now you have a correctional tool as well. Gentle leaders and no pull harnesses are not correctional tools. There's no real level of discomfort there. So the prong collar, of course, mimics like a dog bite when applied correctly. But the issue is when you remove the prong collar or the leash, Marshall will know like, hey, you no longer have a connection to me. So if you call me, there's no immediate aversive. And if he does come to you, whether it be delayed or whatever, you cannot punish him there, because then he thinks he's being punished for coming to you.
Yeah.
Right. So this is why for prong collar, I don't even do prong collar, because it's in my opinion, it's like it's just wasted time.
Mhm.
Because most people want the off leash reliability of like, I don't want to worry about if my dog runs away or can I get them back and stuff. So since I know food by itself will not do that, and if I know that prong collar when removed will also not do that, I don't even bother with that stuff. Now it's good like if you're doing like just real basic stuff, like handling skills and just walking the dog and everything, because it's good. How do you say? It gives you a lot more control. But
Mhm.
typically, once dogs hit 6 months, that's where I tell everybody that's when you just jump into remote collar, because you get adult level control at 6 months and you get off leash control right off the bat.
Yeah. And he does know I mean, he knows his heel is good as long as no other dogs are around, or I mean, he doesn't really pull on the leash, and he does have a pretty decent foundation. Um, but yeah, it's like I think in those non-perfect scenarios is where it's not really working. And I think the issues we're having with the prong collar is that it's hard to do a consistent correction. Like if it's not exactly in the right spot, or like his correction is going to be different than mine and
Yeah.
different than his trainers, and it's like not being able to keep it consistent, I think, is probably confusing to him as well. And um, yeah, we're just not seeing any improvement really
Yeah.
from when we picked him up. I mean, if anything, in parts he's kind of regressed a little bit, and I think that's probably due to the difference in how we correct. But
Yeah. And that's another drawback to prong collar is you're exactly right. Physically, like strength wise, if you can administer a harsh correction that's needed, skill wise, right? Like I've been using prong collars around 10 years now. So like I could take Marshall and like everything that he knows, like it would just boom, just kick in, right? And that's why I love e-collar so much, because it's consistent. If you press the button at 40 and he presses the button at 40 and I press the button at 40, it's just 40. Okay. So then there's no drawback in the sense of like the dog knowing, well, you don't know how to correct correctly and you don't have the strength to correct me harshly. So why do I have to listen? Okay.
mhm.
So when it comes to remote collar, are you guys familiar to like what it is? Like how, like what is the actual tool itself and what it
Not
does?
really.
Yeah, it would be nice to have a little bit of an overview of how it works.
Have you guys ever been to a chiropractor or physical therapist?
No.
Nope. So have you ever seen those like YouTube videos where they recreate labor contraction pains in men?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, have you
They
seen
put
that?
like little electrodes on him, and it like gives you a little
Yeah.
shock. Yeah.
So it's not actually a shock.
Mhm.
It's a muscle contraction. Okay, so you may have seen those commercials, those infomercials where like they put the thing on the stomach and it's like work out your abs as you watch TV, right?
Mhm.
Or at a chiropractor's office or a physical therapist's office, it's these little circles with wires, and they put them on your muscle, and then you'll see the muscle twitching. Okay, so it's not shocking; it's stimulating the muscle. So it's electric, but not electricity. It's not like electric, like a taser or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
centralized. So only your muscle's going to move. You're not going to feel anything anywhere else. Okay, so that's an e-collar. So the term shock comes from old school e-collars because they had like maybe 5 levels. Okay, the e-collars that we use have 127 levels. So the difference is 5 and 127 are the same, but I have 122 more breaks now. So I can really fine tune it. So if the dog was yelping at 4, but not listening at 3, you're stuck. Your dog's not going to listen or your dog is yelping, right?
Mhm.
But if I'm at like 60 and the dog is yelping and I can go down to like 40, the dog's not listening, I can go to 50, 45, 55. I can start to just fine tune it to the dog's exact temperament, okay? So it's just a muscle contraction. So the reason why these tools are effective is because dogs bite each other. That's their consequence for things. That's like the ultimate consequence, right? So like if Marshall was playing with other dogs and maybe he got out of line, one of those dogs might bite Marshall to say, hey, back off of this, right? So let's say he tries to mount a dog and they turn around and they bite him. And he goes, okay, I respect that. I'm not going to mount you again, right? That physicality. So dogs already tend to be physically resilient because they're used to physical contact. They're meant to bite each other. So the e-collar is what I call a bite on the button. Is I can, if like let's say I'm at the dog park and he's doing something I don't want, I can stop the behavior and just increase the power until I find the number that's going to deter him. Okay. Same thing with the obedience. The most common issue that I get with my clients is that they don't go high enough on the collar. Okay, so like let's say, like in your example, you said like once there's dogs or there's other distractions around, the prong collar isn't effective anymore, right? And you might be correcting, but your correction is not to the level that is overriding the environment.
Yeah, I feel like the correction ends up being almost like you have to do it so hard, it ends up like snapping, but also pulling him back too. And it's like that's not what the correction should be. It should just be like you should be able to just snap it quickly and he realizes it, but it's not effective when there's that strong of a distraction for him.
Right, because his brain is overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Okay, so with the e-collar, we can override the brain because I can just keep increasing that level of discomfort until eventually he goes like, you know what? This is not worth, like breaking the heel position is not worth the correction. Does that make sense? So e-collar is the only tool that can make a dog think they're making a decision. Okay, because so like for instance, let's say Marshall is pulling towards a dog, right? And if I correct them with the prong collar, it's either going to be very harsh that I'm practically doing the work and yanking him back, right? But ultimately, if he keeps going back, I'm not how do you say, breaking the mental state. With the e-collar, if he's pulling me and I just anchor myself and it's 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and maybe on 40, Marshall starts to back away. 40 is overriding his response to pull towards whatever it is and telling him to disengage. But he thinks he's the one that's disengaging. That's the difference. Okay. So if you go to our YouTube channel, like we've been recording all the training sessions and stuff, and we can put them up on that so that people can get an idea of like how e-collar works. Because most people think if I say something to a dog and they don't do it, I'm going to punish them, and that's old school style of training.
Mm-hmm.
We do what's called pressure work. We keep increasing the pressure, which is the remote collar, the level of the remote collar, until we get the response that we want from the dog, right? So if I know whenever Marshall sees dogs, I need to be at like 45, I just go to 45,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then right off the bat, he's just like, all right, I'm going to pay attention and behave myself and do the obedience because I don't want to get remoted to 45. Okay, that's how dog brains work. Dogs don't think like humans do. I think people think now that if you train a dog, the dog is supposed to do things because they want to or because they want to make you happy and please you. It's BS. Okay, dogs are self-serving.
Yeah.
Dogs are animals, right? If chasing a squirrel makes Marshall happy, he's going to chase a squirrel and not think, oh, you called me? Let me make you happy in return. Okay. He's going to return because you either can make him return
Yeah.
or the consequence is going to be enough to be like, he's like, you know what? Chasing the squirrel is not worth it. I'm going to just return home because I don't want to be given consequence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because dogs don't give each other treats. Okay. Dogs don't give each other CBD. Dogs simply bite each other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's why earlier I mentioned that the most common issue I have with my clients is they don't want to go high enough on the collar because they feel bad, right? But if the dog's not listening, anything below like 65, why would I be lower than 65 then? And I get client dogs that are trained on 15 to 25. The average range is about 25 to 35. That's usually where most dogs fall. But I have other clients' dogs who are on like 95.
Wow.
And their dog will not listen to anything else but 95 and higher, right? But when we start low and we work our way up, Marshall dictates this.
Mm-hmm.
If Marshall is super compliant at 15, dogs, no dogs, skateboarders, rollerbladers, outside at Busy Oz Park, then 15 is the number because everything is perfect, right? But if 15 works when nothing is around, and then when dogs are around, it's 45, then whenever I see dogs, I just jump to 45. Okay, so it's very logic based. My dogs have been off leash trained for 8 years, and I press the button like once in a blue moon, right? And it's usually because something happened out of nowhere. Like my pit hates fireworks, so like people will randomly set off a firework, right? So if I'm walking them and I don't know that Joe is going to set off a firework, October 31st,
Mm-hmm.
and then she gets spooked, like it's okay because I have a means of getting her back or breaking the mental state of the anxiety caused by the firework. Okay, does this make sense?
Yeah.
So
And I think there's even times where like, because he pretty much wears his prong collar anytime he's out of his crate, and like if we are correcting him and it's just like if we're in the house he wears a leash, and so we need to correct him, it's right there. But I think sometimes he's associating the correction more with us than he had in the past, where I think there might be some more disassociation with like an e-collar where it's not like related to us, it's like giving the punishment, where sometimes I feel like that could be like he knows that we're doing it and doesn't want us to get the leash because we're going to give him a correction.
Right. So you're correct on that because prong collar is confrontational because it's right, which isn't necessarily like a bad thing because it's all about getting the dog to respect the owner more than the tool. Okay. But realistically speaking, and I don't care what method a person uses, whether it's food, prong, or e-call or whatever, in every method, if you remove the training tool or motivation, you're gonna get a dip in response. It's just how it works. So like, it's funny because, trainers like myself will like counter positive only trainers and say like, oh, but you need to have food. But the argument comes back the other way where it's like, well, you need to have your prong recaller, right? In any case, if you remove the motivator, whether positive or negative, you're gonna get a dip.
Yeah.
Right. So he's learned when you grab my leash, that's when the correction has happened. So like in order to prevent that, I'm gonna run away. Right. Mm-hmm. So to essentially fix that, I would correct them from running away.
Yeah.
Grab the leash or whatever. Mm-hmm. But if your correction is not appropriate enough, he's just gonna keep doing it.
Exactly. And I think that's where our problem is it's not consistent.
Yeah.
And like he just is can be a little wild in the house. Like sometimes he's totally fine and will just hang out and chew on a toy. And then other times he's, I don't know if this is even related to e-collar training, but also something to know that he kind of barks for attention, or if he wants to engage with us. And, you know, we've been trying to do a little bit of like all done, but the barking can be a little just incessant when he's like wanting to play or wants our attention.
Okay. So
that's something we want
when in the past, have you ever engaged with Marshall if he came and asked for attention?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in the past we had, yeah, he was he used to bite the couch. And so we kind of like had to interfere in some way, and that's when he was a puppy. But now instead of biting the couch for attention, he's barking for attention, and it's just, yeah.
Sure. And then you try to correct them with leash, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a couple of things here. That can be overstimulation. That's just his brain has an inability to kind of settle, and he wants more activity.
Yeah, right? He cannot settle outside the crate at all. Like he's not taking a nap outside of the crate in months.
Okay, that's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good. That's overstimulation for sure. Okay, so he doesn't have an off switch. Okay, so like our puppies here, like they'll fall asleep and calm down, right? Because if they start to become boisterous or anything, we correct it, we regulate it. So people think that with 2-month-old puppies you can't correct them. That's wrong, because other dogs would correct them. They would bite them, right? But humans treat puppies like these little innocent babies that like don't know right from wrong, and they don't, but they do learn what they can and can't do, right? So like there's a video on YouTube of like a golden retriever mom walking into a room of very yappy puppies.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen that?
And exactly, she like growls at them,
yeah, because she was like, enough of that, right? But for whatever reason, people think it's mean or it's abusive to do that. No, it's healthy and it's needed, because then we get these problems in the future. Okay. And overstimulation issues is the most common problem that I come across, because that's usually a lack of boundaries. Okay. So what I would do here, and I'll send you these videos actually, I'm making a note of it here, is when it comes to stopping a behavior, it's simple. It's just don't do that. Okay. Most trainers will teach, like, if your dog is barking for attention or chewing on the couch or like, you know, this and that, grab a bone, grab a toy, like redirect them, right? What you're doing is you're creating a problem, because you're just feeding into that. You're saying, if you do this, you will get this. Does that make sense? So like some puppies will learn, like, if I chew on the couch, you always bring out a bone, or you always bring out a toy, and you play with me for 15 minutes. So then just keep chewing on the couch. You keep playing with them for 15 minutes, right? So now you're creating this habit. Whereas if I go, you don't want to, if I don't want the dog or puppy to chew on the couch, I correct them, and I go, chewing on the couch is not an option for you, right? So I do a correction similar to another dog biting them, and the puppy goes, all right, if I try to chew on the couch, I get bit. I don't want to chew on the couch anymore, right? So what you can try using here is I would do a bonker. Have you tried that?
We've not, but I know what it is. I read about it a couple months ago.
Sure. So there's 3 videos that I'll send you. Okay. The reason why I suggest the bonker is because dogs tend to have weaknesses, just like humans do, right? You can have a dog super resilient to the prong collar, very receptive to the e-collar. Okay. Or I can have a dog that's very resilient to the e-collar, but very sensitive to the prong collar. Okay. Same thing with the bonker. And it also doesn't require you to grab a leash. Okay. So I'm going to send you 3 videos, how to make one, how to use one, and a trainer actively using the bonker, so that you can see exactly how the correction is done. Now, of course, when it comes to corrections, there's all about the intensity and stuff. So then you have to see how Marshall responds to it. Okay. Now, no matter what kind of correction you do, people always get concerned with, like, am I going to ruin my dog or like ruin the relationship? It's not going to happen unless you put in emotion. That's the problem, is that when people correct their dogs, especially with, you know, like the prong collar or the bonker or even e-collar, is they're like yelling and they're angry about it, right? because they waited too long because they were hoping the dog would be a good dog and opt to do the right thing. Whereas we don't, we just correct immediately as soon as we see something that we don't want. So then we never get an escalation of frustration. Okay. So with this, what I would do is after you start incorporating it, you want to keep an eye on his behavior. If you start noticing, oh wow, like Marshall's getting calmer in the home, he's now taking a nap as opposed to like looking for constant stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing its job.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if the bonker is not working and you're like, no, Jesse, we can bonk the crap out of him and he's just still a brat, then he's more than likely a candidate for the. I think every dog's a candidate for the e-collar. But that's definitely his overstimulation levels. It's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
That the only tool is going to help you
and a
settle.
bonker is just like a towel, like tightly rolled, right?
Yeah, you roll it up and then hair bands or rubber bands to keep its shape.
And you just kind of like toss it at them to like just like get them out of their anxiety loop or their whatever they're focused on, right?
Right. Okay. So it's just a different type of correction to see how does he respond to it, to see if it's better than what you're doing with the prong collar.
Yeah. Okay. And his settling in the house has definitely gotten better since he's been back. And now we have like a few tools. So if he is getting kind of like overwhelmed or he's just, you know, having the zooms or whatever, like we'll take him through like a series of like heel and sit and stay and like, you know, do a couple things and then put him in place and he'll calm and he'll lay there for a little bit. But yeah, he's not really, I would say in the last month, he's probably taken one nap, maybe two out of his crate.
So you're actually feeding the cycle. Because so remember earlier I mentioned, you know, like let's say he's chewing on the couch and they redirect him with a toy.
Yeah.
He's getting the zoomies, you're essentially just redirecting him to obedience. As opposed to saying, don't do the zoomies.
Yeah.
Okay. So in order for him to self-regulate, you have to regulate him first. Okay. Because even though like he's like settling and holding in place or whatever, like you just said, he's napped like 2 times since you've had him or in the last few months, right?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Okay. That's telling me that it's just constant stimulation because no one's told them these are not options. So your only option is to relax and nap. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like it's not playtime. It's not chewing the Christmas tree time. It's
you don't do that.
Yeah. Those are things you can't do.
Just don't zoom. You don't bark at me. You don't jump on me. You don't jump on whatever your rules are. It's just, you don't do that. Right. So like for me growing up, my mom was super strict. Like I was spanked and stuff. And if I got too loud, it was just like, no, that's not going to happen. It wasn't like, oh dear, let me take you out to the woods and you can scream your brains out and run around, right? Like she didn't feed into that. She's like, no, you're not going to do that. Smack me upside the head with a sandal. You know, that's how dogs operate. So like, let's say Marshall was at my place with my dogs, like in my home, and he started zooming around. My dogs will not tolerate that. They would immediately pursue him and bite him and possibly pin him and say, you don't zoom in our house. And he'd say, sorry. And then they walk away and he's like, all right, don't zoom around here. I'm going to just take a nap. Is that okay? Cool. It's super simple. Okay. And this is the most common thing that I get is, you know, if you do research online, it's usually like redirect the dog, you know, don't correct them and this and that. No, corrections have to happen. It's just a matter of, is the correction that you're using actually working? You know, and this is normal stuff like prong collar. A lot of times it does like people have an issue with it, which is why I don't really bother with it anymore. So then there's the bonker as well. And sometimes that doesn't work either. So the way the e-collar works is because since that's the tool that I know will make the dog comply and listen despite the environment. I don't care if you're at Home Depot. I don't care if you're at PetSmart. I don't care if you're walking through Oz Park in the middle of summer where it's super busy. The dog's going to listen. That's actually what ties into the home. Because the dog is getting formal discipline that it respects. And he's like, oh crap, I don't want to mess with an 85. So I'm going to just chill out. Right? And the size of the owner doesn't matter. I had a lady who was like 90 pounds, 150-pound Great Dane, who was dog reactive. So he was on both a prong and an e-collar because she needed the most leverage because she was only like 90 pounds. And then within like 2 classes, it was done. because she had all the tools and his number was fairly high. I think she was like 65, 75
Wow.
because we couldn't, because he would just drag her across the street, no problem, you know? So for her, we had to overcompensate a bit because I couldn't gamble the dog because he could, you know, hurt her and also hurt another dog because he was so large.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it's super common. I mean, from what I've seen from Marshall here, like he's chill with us.
Mm-hmm.
We've never had any issues with him behaviorally. He's quiet when he's on his break time for the kennel and stuff like that. Even with dogs playing, like he's not whining or crying to continue to engage. Like he just settles.
Yeah, he's great. Like we work from home, and I mean, he stays in his crate from 9 to noon, and then from 1 to 5, if not later, and is fine. And he'll wake up and play by himself. And so like, it's just not consistent, his kind of behavior. And maybe I it sounds like the anxiety loops just get going, and we're reinforcing it when he is out of his crate. But
Yeah, and it's not so much like anxiety loops. I would call them stimulation loops because anxiety is a bit different.
Okay.
What would make, and actually, like, what would make you think it's an anxiety loop? Like, what are you seeing that makes you think anxiety?
I don't know. I mean, there's definitely sometimes where he seems like he'll like he has a couple of toys that he like really loves, and most of them we've had to kind of take away from him because he'll like obsessively like chew on them. They're like hold on to them and like pant really heavy, and like he's just getting like worked up. And so definitely there's a little bit of it could be simulation too, but it just kind of seems more like anxiety. But I don't know, what would anxiety look like in a dog then?
Constant panting and whining, moving around a lot, circling, usually in response to something, like let's say someone rang the doorbell and he started barking, and then he would just start circling because his brain has he got overloaded with stress. Kind of like with humans, right? When people get anxious, like we tend to pace. Salivation, sometimes, depending on what the anxiety is coming from, like really bulgy eyes. It sounds like stimulation.
Okay.
Overstimulation. Anxiety and overstimulation can look similar, and sometimes they tend to feed into each other because it's the brain's inability to stop. So like people who get really anxious tend to overthink things. They can't stop themselves from like overthinking something. They get really anxious. Same thing for dogs. Overstimulation, it's just the lack of what I would say boundaries and rules, right? So like if we take a classroom full of children and the bell rings, right? Like in the beginning, they're like shuffling around, they're noisy and all that stuff, but then the school bell rings and everybody shuts up, sits down, goes to their desks, right? Because it means rules. And then once the bell rings for school is out, now it's like, okay, cool, we get to go home. There's no more school rules in effect, right? So it's the same thing for dogs, is when there's no, and I'm not saying that you haven't established rules, it's not been established to where he respects and is actually like being affected by them, right? Because if he was, we wouldn't be here. It'd be a different conversation where it's like, Jesse, we just need off-leash control. Like, he's a great dog. He relaxes and he just chills. He doesn't bark at us. Like, he's really calm, because you've established all these things that he can't do.
Yeah.
So, other questions?
Well, do you have any questions?
Any questions?
I'm trying to think. Trying to think of other sort of, I mean, you're right, definitely like there are some things that he respects and others that he definitely doesn't when it comes to the rules. And like at different times, or if he's tired, he listens better. So I think there's definitely some work to be done there. Yeah, I guess really my question is like, what would you recommend? Like, what do you think the course of action in training, if we're really looking for, I mean, he's just turned 6 months, and I know this is like the best time to train. I think he has a pretty decent foundation, but I know that if we, the next couple months are really important.
Sure. So in terms of his obedience and stuff, off-leash can happen at any time because of the tool. Like I train dogs like 5 years into life, never a lick of training. and I train them to the same level of control that I would train a dog at 6 months who's already had a foundation. Okay. Because it's just the tool itself. And the methods that I use when I work with my clients, they're off leash methods. It's just a matter of, does the owner want to do enough work to get the dog to off leash level?
Yeah.
Makes sense? So a lot of times, if you were to watch, I think it's once we start to recall, like if you watch like a private lesson, in almost every case, if not by the third class, by the fourth class, you'll see me doing long leash heel with the owner. Okay, so long leash heel is when we have a nice long 30-foot leash and we're practicing the heel. So the dog has a 30-foot leash to run away, but the dog is glued to the owner. And the owner's thinking their dog's gonna run away. And they're like, holy crap, like the dog is glued to me. I'm like, yeah, because the methods that we're using are meant for off leash. Okay, but now we have to transition things because I have to get the owner used to how this feels, because it's weird to have your dog walking at your hip with no leash on. It's a very weird feeling for a lot of people because they're like, what if my dog runs away? So we have phases that we do to get them used to that.
Got it.
So in terms of timeline, when you should get Marshall in, there's no rush. Okay. My thing has always been people should do the training themselves. Okay, because you learn so much more. We already know how to train dogs. We train dogs all day. I've been training dogs for 10 years. I can have a dog off leash trained in 2 days. Okay, because of I know the shortcuts. I've been doing this for 10 years, and I don't need fancy. I need functional. Okay, so if you did it yourself in person, because he's already got a solid foundation, it just means you're going to have a shorter time frame. Okay, at minimum 6 classes. And then usually with dogs who've already had a foundation, if you're trying to get full off leash control, you're probably going to be leaning more towards 9 classes, because we have to layer e-collar over all the commands. Okay, so people think if I teach sit with the food or the prong collar, all I do is transition to a remote and my dog doesn't sit, I just shock him. And I go, no, that's completely wrong. You have to reteach the behaviors using the e-collar. Okay, the difference is the dog already knows how to sit, already knows how to down. So it does make that easier.
Got it.
Okay. So once we layer the remote over it, then I start giving you the exercises to practice to build up to off leash. Okay. Now off leash takes time, especially the recall. Recall takes the longest to teach because it requires you to go somewhere to practice. With Marshall, with squirrels and dogs and people and rabbits, right? Calling them off of prey. So like I posted a video on Instagram. I don't know if you guys saw it, with this dog. His name was Gilmore, and we're at Oz Park. And it's a clip from a training session. It was their 11th out of 12 classes. Okay, and this dog was 6 months. And he takes off after a tree. When he was released, the owner says break. He takes off after a tree about 120 feet away. There's a squirrel in the tree. He's got very strong prey drive. The owner calls him, boom, 180, right back, no hesitation. Comes right back to the owner, right? And I tell him, release him again. He releases him, and now mid-pursuit, back towards that tree, I go call him. And he right away U-turns and comes right back to the owner, okay? So here, all I said was, use your environment. That your dog has great prey drive, harness it. So now I have a distraction and a reward, right? So once we got to, I think, the 9th or 10th class, I started seeing them every 2 weeks to give them time to go out and practice stuff, because it's all about time.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time we hit that 11th out of 12 classes, their recall was super solid. And they're calling them away from, dog parks, playing with dogs, chasing squirrels, chasing rabbits and stuff, because of that. But it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
If you do a daycare or board and train, the issue is we don't have rabbits here. We don't have squirrels here. We don't have that outside environment to work with, right? Any program that you use, you're gonna have a drawback. And that's the biggest one. So that's why I always tell people, train the dog yourself. You learn more. The training is right away tied to you. It's not tied to us, because the other part is you get to transfer it. So like at TOPS, so I'm assuming you had a follow-up lesson or whatever.
Yeah, we did.
It's tomorrow, actually.
Yeah, we have our final follow-up tomorrow, but we did 3 handoff lessons. Like, he stayed there. We went 3 days in a row, and then took him home on the 3rd. And they gave us a sheet of like exactly how you should do the different obedience and how they should be corrected. But there wasn't any like, and I think I even asked, I was like, how often should we, is there a way that we should be going about making sure that we're hitting all of these, should we be doing a formal training session or just organically? And like, it was just hard to kind of implement other than, the standard walking. It was harder to implement in the home other than, just correct based off of like what we want our house rules to be. And so it wasn't really clear of how we should go about it.
So the problem with obedience is people have a hard time translating it to their life. So in obedience training, we have 6 commands: sit, stay, down, come, place, heel. Okay. The most used one is heel. The most important one is recall. Okay. Sit, down, and place are superficial. Okay. Because having your, like, when do you need Marshall to sit? Maybe when you put on his collar, maybe before you exit doors, right? Maybe when you feed him. But these are all things that I train by default. Like, my dogs automatically sit when I bring out the collar. They automatically sit when I bring out the bowl. So sit is like it's like overrated. Because like, let's say the dog is jumping. Most people say sit, right? Or I just correct the dog for jumping. Does that make sense? So, because people make things more complicated because they're like, I don't want my dog to jump. I want them to sit, which is fine. But it's as simple as just correcting the dog for jumping and letting the dog make the decision. And more often than not, the dog will just sit automatically without the cue. It's kind of like saying please, right? The down command or the place command are interchangeable because they're meant for extended control. So if you go to a restaurant patio, down or place, right? But unless you're going to a restaurant patio every day and bringing Marshall to work on it, like, it's not going to be used that often. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what I tell people is you look at your life and then you look at what would you want Marshall to do in certain situations. So if you say, hey, when we're eating dinner, we would like Marshall to be away from us, not begging. So I go, well, then you can use your place command or you can use the down command. They're both meant for duration control, right? When it comes to the sit, I just go, and the most common would be putting on the leash or collar, giving treats, giving food before thresholds, right? Which if he's got a good heel, he should be sitting automatically. So the verbal sit really is not really used because the dog just sits automatically for things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The stay command for me is, I don't use it with sit, down, or place. It's implied that the dog stay. The only time I say stay myself is if the dog is already in position. So like, let's say Marshall's laying on his dog bed. Marshall already knows how to place, right? He knows the command. He's on his dog bed on his own time. Then technically Marshall can get off whenever he wants, right? But like, let's say he's on the dog bed and you decide like, you know what, Marshall, I actually need you to not move now. Most people will say like, you remove the dog and then you say place to initiate or trigger the command, right? Or that's when I use stay.
Yeah.
Stay. Now it becomes a place command. Does that make sense? Okay. So with the stuff that he's learned, just think to yourself, like, how can I apply it to my life? The most important training is applied training. Because people expect if I do a 15-minute session with my dog, that it should just transfer to life, and it doesn't. You have to incorporate it. So the moment we teach a skill, the moment I teach an owner to like place their dog, I'll tell them, find time where you can incorporate this when you're eating, when you're cooking, when you're working from home, when you're watching Netflix, right? Anytime you're just gonna not be doing anything for a bit, use the command, right? That's how you practice it. So the dog starts to think, oh, sometimes I'm here when you're eating. Sometimes you're like on the treadmill. Sometimes you're watching TV. Sometimes guests are over. So then the dog starts to differentiate, as opposed to like, if you do a 15-minute training session, he's going to be great because it's a 15-minute training session. He's like, all right, my job is done. Now I go back to being Marshall. Does that make sense? So with the stuff that he's learned, just think about like where you would like to apply things and then just start applying it organically. Because if he already knows it, there's no need to practice it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you talked earlier about like, um, outside of your training, like to practice out, like how many times a day or like a week or like, would you recommend to
Every
practice?
day, all day.
How much?
Every day, all day.
Yeah,
When you
okay.
need it. Okay.
What about like outside? You were talking about like the where there's like high distraction area.
So, the household.
Like, is that what you were asking?
Yeah, like at the park or something. Like how like
So like
should we
let's
do like
say
an hour a day or like 15 minutes a day or like 15 minutes twice a week?
so let's say you go to the park with the intention of like letting Marshall be Marshall, and you're gonna spend an hour. Okay, maybe it's a 15-minute walk to the park. That 15 minutes, he's in a tight heel. Okay, when I approach the park, he should automatically sit. I wait a moment, break, and now he's free. Now he's being Marshall, right? Let's say we're walking with Marshall, he's off leash, he's just enjoying himself. And then I see someone walking their dog, and I go, I don't want Marshall to just run up to that dog. Come, right? He returns to me, he should automatically sit. I have him under control. That person leaves with their dog. Break. He's back to being Marshall again, right? So you're incorporating the training as you just live your life with Marshall, okay? So the training sessions are either to teach something new or to improve upon an already existing behavior. Think of it that way. So once Marshall has like mastered a command, so if you say sit, boom, he just does it, right? And I go, great. I don't need to do training sessions because you just do the sit now. I just use it. So your application of the training is what actually is what makes it better and is what makes it applicable in life because you're just using it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm trying to break away between we're going to the park for a training session. And it's just like once he learns how to just walk on a leash in a tight heel, you just heel him as you go to the dog park. You heel him as you go to Petco, you know?
Yeah.
And those are great distractions because if he knows the path to the dog park, he's going to want to forage. But if he respects the command of heel and he's tight on my hip as we walk to the dog park, that's a trained dog.
Yeah.
Okay. So if think of training sessions when you're teaching something new. So like if you're to teach Marshall finish, which means to come into heel position, okay, you would have to do training sessions to teach that, and you keep repeating it. Once I feel Marshall has mastered it, now I just apply it in life. No need to practice it 15 minutes a day because your application and use of it throughout the day is what keeps everything like how to say updated, like it keeps it functional. It's
really,
when you don't use it that the dogs forget it.
So it's really it just comes down to being consistent in everyday life with like sticking with the boundaries and correcting when he pushes them.
Correct. Right. So think of obedience as control to allow you to have a life with Marshall, like outside, right? And behavior is just like the little like annoying things. So like if he's barking at me, I'm not going to tell him like right now, I'm not going to tell him sit because what does sit have to do with barking?
Yeah.
Right? I would correct that. But a lot of trainers will tell you that. Tell your dog to sit. You know, I had a trainer tell a client to down their dog because a dog cannot bark when they're in the down position. And I was like, that is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. Do you know how many times I've seen my dog wake up from a nap, laying down and bark? You know? So there's some like crazy stuff out there. It's really just don't bark at me. Correction. You know, so like if I was like yelling at my mom, like mom, it was whack, don't annoy me. Right? She didn't tell me like go do math for 20 minutes. It was just you don't do that to me. It's disrespectful.
Yeah. So as far as the like continued training goes, since he has a pretty decent like foundation, like he does know whether he answers and follows them every single time they're given, he doesn't know what they are. So would you suggest that do we need to do training like tacked onto daycare, would there be any real benefit to that, or should we do
No.
more like structured and just
You would do, if you're gonna advance his training, you would do either like a daycare and train, because you get, just like with tops, there's follow-up,
Mhm.
right? Like you have to know how the tools work, right? The tacked on training, because it's prong collar, wouldn't transfer to you, because that's still gonna be your skill set, right? So Marshall's gonna go, oh, at Jesse's facility, they know how to correct me correctly.
yeah.
I'm gonna behave. But as
Mhm.
soon as I go back to mom and dad, no, they don't know, right? Um, when we do the tacked on training, so like let's say we have a client who does e-collar, and they're like, hey Jesse, like we've slacked on like, place work. Can you work on that? We go, sure, because e-collar very easily transfers.
Mhm.
Okay. And then we give them a real quick synopsis of like, we did this and this. And because e-collar is very easy to understand, the owner goes, great, thank you. I'm going to do that now. Okay. But if
Mhm.
it's someone who's never done e-collar before, you need to know how it works.
Mhm.
Okay. Because it's not as simple as press a button and your dog listens. There's more to it. So what we've done is, and my suggestion, of course, is always, especially with a dog like Marshall, because he's a great dog, is
Thank
you do it yourself because you learn so much more.
you. Mhm.
With the daycare and train, again, we know how to do all this stuff already.
Yeah.
But what we've been doing is we teach, we record the first session of everything that we teach with the e-collar, and we make a video, and I call it the explanatory sessions, and we send it to you. And the moment you get that video, you can watch it and begin applying the e-collar. Okay. And then you get follow-up. So then what a lot of our clients do is they'll do their daycare train or board and train.
Mhm.
They watch their video, they do what they need to do, and they come back 2 weeks later, a month later, and they're like, Jesse, everything's great, but we struggle with this. We don't understand it.
Mhm.
So we use the follow-up sessions to close the gap, to help them understand how to fix certain things. Okay. And then, so daycare and trains and board and trains come with follow-up because we want to transfer things to you.
Mhm.
An added training session is really only effective if we're doing e-collar with the dog that's already been e-collar trained, because the owner already knows how to use the tool. It's a very quick pass off. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if we did like a daycare and train for however many days,
Mhm.
and we watch the videos, we have the follow-up lessons, we feel pretty good about it, and then there's things that we want to then add on, so maybe then we want to do more like off-leash recall, or
Mhm.
we want to improve his place command. That would be something that we could then, if it was place, we could tack that on to like daycare and you guys could work on that. But if we wanted to do like more sessions with like off leash, would that be like a one-on-one session we would do?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You learn the most that way. Okay. The only time I really do daycare where I recommend it, and I make more money doing a daycare and train. Okay. But I don't care about the money. I care about the owner being educated and knowing how to use their tools. Okay. Is uh, when you do it yourself, everything again is tied to you. With the daycare and train, everything's tied to us,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to transfer it to you. Okay. So then, like, let's say you do a 10-day and you get your follow-ups, you've watched your video, and then you want to work on like just tightening up the recall, then yes, absolutely, you can always do, a one-off lesson or whatever
Mm-hmm.
with anything that you might have question wise. Um, recall is the one that takes the longest to teach. Okay. Because we can only do so much here. Real training is when you go out with your life with Marshall and you're walking down, you take him to the park and you're actively using your training. That's the best training, right? So that's why for our program, like the first week is on short leash. The second week, we already progressed to long leash. The third week, we're working in the pen. The fourth week, they take trips out to Horner Park. And also, they take trips to like training trips to Home Depot and stuff. So we take the dog out to apply their training, because we want it to transfer and be applicable in the real world. That's one of the things I stress is I want the obedience when the owner gets the dog to be applicable in the real world. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time. The other thing is like place work. We do that here already. Like the dogs that you see here on place are already trained by us. It's just something that we do. You wouldn't pay extra for that. Okay. Because I'm all about structure. So it's not just play all day, it's play. We have treadmill time or the pack walks, and then we have duration work, and then there's kennel time. So we divide the day up so the dog's not constantly wired on play.
Yeah.
Help them, come home calm and like relaxed and tired and fulfilled, and not just like this,
Yeah, just running all day. Yeah, got it.
Okay. So it's really personal preference. If you're wanting to push him more towards off leash, because he's got the foundation, you'd be probably around the 10-day if you're doing like a daycare and train. So you just drop him off like a regular day of daycare. Now we try to get the videos to the owner as soon as possible. So usually we can get that done within 2-3 days of his daycare and train, and we send it to you. And then right off the bat, once you get that video, just start applying stuff, and then if you have any questions and you're ready for your follow-up, you can schedule that whenever. And then we meet together, we tighten that up, and I go continue with what you're doing. And then maybe a month later, you're like, we want to do another one. And they go, okay, here's another one. And then eventually he's trained and you're good to go.
And now, do you think that would be the most effective way to go about it? Would do the daycare and train?
Do you want this faster, or do you want to learn more?
Probably learn more.
Then you want to do it yourself.
Okay. And what do you mean by do it yourself? Like, what is, like, when you say that?
So you meet with me,
okay.
Right? I don't touch the dog. I coach you through everything. Okay. So you're making mistakes and you're figuring it out, and I'm coaching you through it. Okay. Then I go practice this for the next week. I see you the next week. How you doing? Great. Where are our problems? This is where we're having issues. Okay. This is what we're going to do to fix it. Now we're going to move on to new stuff.
Got it.
Okay. So, this is because of COVID, like everything's verbal instruction now. Not that I don't, work with dogs with the owner from time to time, but with the verbal instruction, like nothing is tied to me. Everything is tied to you. You learn a ton more because let's say Marshall's off leash trained. You're at the park with Marshall and someone shoots a big explosive firecracker and Marshall's running for his life. Are you going to know what to do?
No.
Right?
Not now.
Not now, right?
Now I have no idea what I would do.
And that's something that I cover in one-on-one training, because in the training sessions, I do things to purposely make the dog run away. Okay? Because what happens is the dog runs away, the owner freaks out.
Yeah.
But we're in controlled context with me there. And I'm going to make a video on this. It's just my media guy he's military duty right now. But like I had a client, the dog was on a long 30-foot leash and the dog took off after another dog. And I'm yelling in the video, back, back, tap, 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 back, 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 right? And she's just like, ah. So finally she just like doesn't know what to do. And the dog comes back because she just didn't do anything and the dog got bored, right? Is I said, how did that feel? And she's like, oh my God, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. And I was like, I was telling you what to do. She's like, I panicked. I didn't know. And I said, welcome to life. Okay. And I said, in that moment, we had controlled context. You had your dog on a leash. You had the e-collar. You had me yelling at you. Right. And I was like, in life, things are going to happen. Anytime anybody has come back to me and said, Jesse, I am so glad I did e-collar. It has been some crazy ass scenario. Okay. I had a dog get confronted by a coyote in Lincoln Park. I had a dog take off several times because of fireworks. Dogs getting out the front door, like all these like just crazy things. And the owner was able to get the dog back because of e-collar. But the way I teach it is I teach the owner how to think on the fly in case that thing happens. Because there's no, like Marshall running away from a firecracker is not the same as Marshall, running after a dog to play. They're very different behaviors because of what they're fueled by, right? So when Marshall's running away, you have to think, how do I make him return when he's in flight mode? And all you have is this tool. Because if you call him, Marshall, come, he's like, screw you, man. I'm
Can't
scared.
hear anything. Yeah, no.
I'm gone.
He's in a different world. Yeah, when he's in that like dog or squirrel kind of mode, he can't even hear us. Like it's just not even there. Yeah.
Correct. So in one-on-one sessions, we would cover that, and you would spend so much time working with him and me, you learn all that stuff.
Mhm.
With the daycare and train follow-up, you're only getting a couple of hours of follow-up. You're not going to get that component.
And I think that was the issue with the board and training. I mean, his foundation was totally worth the money because he's a different dog and it's great, but we're the ones that need the training. Like we just don't know how to like implement it into our life and like make it just part of what we do. And so yeah, I think it would be, you said about 6 classes, you think?
Yeah, so 6 at minimum.
Okay.
If you did 6 and you're trying to build to off leash, I would really just streamline through stuff. Okay. And most likely put you on a bi-weekly schedule.
Okay.
Okay. And I would focus on the heel, on the recall, because those are the 2 most important things, and maybe 1 durational command like place.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then give you the process to build those commands to off leash reliability. If you want all 6 commands, sit, stay, down, come, place, heel, build to off leash, I would opt more towards 9.
Okay.
The recall is the most important command. That command has to be off leash reliable. Yeah. Otherwise, it's pointless.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want it for.
Yes.
Yeah.
So after we teach the heel, that's typically 2 classes, right? We're going to reteach it.
Yeah, you're reteaching it with the e-collar instead of the prong, or
correct. And then you have to unlearn the prong collar.
Yeah.
Because I get clients who are trained on prong collar who are yanking their dog. I'm like, don't yank the dog, remote the dog. Mm-hmm. Right? So you got to break bad habits.
Yeah.
Did they teach you how to do leg movements with the heel?
What do you mean?
Like if you come to a stop with Marshall and he's in a heel, what do you do before you stop?
Like I'll say like Marshall sit, like as I'm about to stop, and by the time I'm stopping, he's sitting.
Did they teach you that?
Yes.
That's wrong. It's supposed to be automatic. Because then you're going heel, sit, heel.
Yeah, I think eventually I think I asked, I was like, shouldn't the heel be automatic? And he was like, eventually, yes, but I still do it. I mean, he sits automatic. I mean, he does sit automatically, but
it should be. It's literally a week. We build the stuff in a week.
Yeah, and I think that was the thing, is like I didn't know when I should phase commands out either. Like
immediately.
Yeah.
Because the more you use it, the more he becomes reliant on it.
Exactly. And I've noticed that with like place and him sitting, like, cause I'll say stay and like remind him. And I think he's waiting on, oh, well, she hasn't said stay in a while. That means I can get up.
Yeah. So that's why I don't say anything. Yeah. I just correct the dog, and we'll discuss this stuff. This is super common.
Okay.
Because when it's a whole spiel of its own.
Sure.
It's much simpler than it seems. Okay. Mm-hmm. Heel typically. So if I come to a stop with the dog, so let's say you're walking. Mm-hmm. If you come to a stop abruptly, the dog will most likely pass you. So the human is supposed to slow down, mm-hmm. so that the dog can slow down with the human, so that when the human stops, the dog is able to sit and line up with the human.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's what I meant. Like before you come to a stop, like what do you do?
Slow down.
When you turn, did they tell you how to do your leg movements for the turns?
So no, they just said if you like turn for him, like when we had the handoff a couple weeks, well, I guess it's been more than a month now. He was like, if you were going to turn or make any like swift whatever, to say heel again, to ensure that he was going to stick with you.
Not necessarily. Yeah. You mentioned like dog's ears should be at your hip, so if you're turning, like it would know.
It would hit him. Like if you were going to turn left, if he was in the right heel position, your leg would like bump into him, and he would know to like turn.
Okay, yeah, that's wrong too. So, once you start,
we could have learned it wrong. Also, that is another.
Yeah, no, I've trained a lot of ex-Tops dogs. So we actually just had one that left a month ago. So here, when you start the training, it's gonna make sense. Okay, we do a lot of body language stuff. Because you have to communicate with Marshall so that he knows when you're turning left and when you're turning right. I only say heel once, and then the dog follows. Mm-hmm. It's super simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll say it after a correction. Like if he's not, like, yeah, if we're walking and he breaks heel, I correct and say heel.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's correct.
That's bad habit. Well, it's how you were taught, but that's bad habit. Because every time you say a command, you're resetting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you say sit and Marshall gets up and you say sit again, you've reset the sit. So he's not learned to not break the sit.
Yeah, rather than just correcting him into that position.
Yeah, and he has to correct himself into it.
Mm-hmm.
So if Marshall's in a sit and he stands up and I correct him, no warning, he should, with no direction, replace himself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, man, if mom or dad say sit, if I get up, there's an automatic correction. The only way to avoid the correction is to keep my butt on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
That's how dogs learn.
Got it.
Okay. I'll clarify all this stuff for you. Okay.
Yeah,
but you see how much more learning there is?
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
Yes. So this is why I would advise you do it yourself.
Okay.
It takes longer. Your obedience will be more reliable. You're going to learn so much more. Okay. And we can clear up a lot of these bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because you're not going to get that at the daycare and train. Okay.
Yeah.
Or the board and train. And again, I make more money in a short amount of time. I don't care about that. I care about you being happy with the level of control you have over your dog. Okay. So the collar that Marshall would need, because he's going to be a big boy, right?
Yeah. He's already over 60 and at 6 months. Yeah.
You're going to want the Dogtra 1900S Black Edition. You can get these on Amazon.
Okay.
I think it runs like $325-ish with tax.
Okay.
It's a 1 mile range, so plenty of range for a standard family pet. Completely waterproof, both the transmitter and the receiver.
All these were initially made for like hunting, right? Wasn't that the
correct? Yeah. And you'll find stuff that's cheaper on Amazon, but you get what you pay for. And I don't work with clients with cheap collars. You want to get a quality brand collar. That particular model is the one that Marshall would need.
Okay.
They last for years. I've had mine for 8 years, no issue. So it's an investment, but it's going to last you a long time. Okay. And then other than that, you guys can mull over what you want to do. 6, I'll just pick a few commands. I'll try to streamline you guys through it. But we'll be sacrificing stuff. If you want to know, like, okay, we're going to get like all the education and the level of off-leash control, 9 should be more than enough.
Okay.
And then Maria will get in contact with you, and then there's no rush. Like this, I just wanted to educate you, make you aware of the limitations. I didn't want to tell you, yes, tack on some training when I knew it wasn't going to be what you wanted.
Yeah, no, this is great because we're the ones that need to learn, and so I think you've helped us a lot just to, number one, realize that, and then also like figure out what might be the best options for him.
Yeah,
we want a good dog. I mean, he's good already. We just want him to stay that way and to be better.
Yeah, and this is a lifestyle. This doesn't ever stop. Marshall's a 3 to 4 year old kid up here, forever.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would suggest is if you'd like just to educate yourself more, you can go to my YouTube channel.
Okay.
Lesson 1s are always really good to watch because nobody knows what they're doing but me. There's a one that I just put up actually with the Rottweiler that's been pretty popular. His name is King. It was uploaded like within the past week.
Okay.
Because he's a 7-month-old dog, but he was like dragging his owner all over the place because he was nervous. Mm-hmm. And then you see just beginning to end just how well like e-collar works and how simple it is. If you want to get an idea of what I mean by leg movements, lesson 2 is what you would want to watch. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's any good examples. But yeah, lesson 2 is when I talk about like speeding up and slowing down, turning left, turning right, pivoting, and using body language to communicate what you're doing on the heel. If you want to just kind of get an understanding of what that is. I've had clients as well, like watch stuff and start training on their own. And then they come to me and they're like, hey, Jesse, I kind of already started. This is what I'm at, and okay, show me. And then I'll fix things. So they actually end up getting more. I don't care because that's what the stuff is for. Like I put it up there to educate people. So if like you jump ahead and you educate yourself and you're like, oh, we already learned the turns and you show me and the turns look really good, then I go, great, let's move on to the next thing then. Okay. So just another just kind of source of education for you. Otherwise, when you're ready, just shoot Maria an email. There's no rush. You have plenty of time to do this stuff.
Okay.
Plus, it's the winter time, so you want to think that, are you going to be realistically practicing outside,
Mhm.
with recall and stuff like that? And if the answer is yes, then by all means, feel free to start. If the answer is we'd rather wait till spring, then just wait till spring.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right, guys. It was a pleasure meeting everybody officially.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, feel free to let us know. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll see Marshall at daycare at some
Yeah,
point.
we definitely. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Great. Bye.